Hey guys, what's happening? And welcome to this live edition of Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe. Great to be with you here. And the news we've all been waiting for is in. Probably not the news that Syracuse football fans wanted to hear, but certainly wish Kyle McCord well as he will pursue a career in the National Football League. He puts out the statement today that they will no longer pursue a waiver from the NCAA, which in and of itself is an interesting conversation about whether he would have got that waiver or not, and the procedure in trying to get that waiver, which was unprecedented. But the whole process of you're telling me there's a chance, there's a hope, there's at least the process to see if he could come back, had Syracuse fans kind of waiting on bated breath, not since Carmelo Anthony after winning the national championship in 2003, and just the hint, the thought, the possibility, the chance that echoed through Syracuse were one more year. And that's all Syracuse football fans were hoping for Kyle McCord at Syracuse was one more year, a loss that will not happen. He is going to pursue a career in the National Football League and putting out a statement today that he will enter the NFL draft. Here it is, by the way. Kyle McCord putting this out on social media. You can see it there, but I'll read it to you briefly. 1 year can truly change your life. First and foremost, I want to thank God for giving me the ability to play the sport that I love. It has been an incredible journey to this point. Throughout the entire process, one thing has stayed consistent, and that is my family's love and support. Having you guys in my corner means the world, and I hope to continue to make you all proud. Coach Fran Brown will be forever grateful for your constant belief and trust in me during my time at Syracuse. You changed my life, brought me closer to God, and allowed me to tap into my full potential as a player. Our relationship is one that I will always cherish. He thanks Coach Nixon and Coach Nunzio Campanelli, thanks his brothers, his teammates, and he thanks these Syracuse fans, saying, playing in the Dome will be some of my best memories. A lot of that is because of the fans. You welcomed me with open arms, and your unwavering love and support inspired us all season long. So Kyle McCord goes to the National Football League, and he has cemented himself on the Mount Rushmore of Syracuse quarterbacks. Let's start there. We'll look at the future of Syracuse football, the quarterbacks in the room that could take over. Will Syracuse continue to pursue a quarterback in the transfer portal? Things can still happen in the portal. Carson Beck went from Georgia to Miami like that. So will Fran Brown keep an eye on the portal? He's already done that, bringing in Rickie Collins Jr. from LSU. Are they done in the portal? The questions for next year and what is a very hard schedule for Syracuse football, to say the least. And that's the thing with Kyle McCord. He solved so many problems. When you have a great quarterback, it solves so many of your issues, and it was certainly the catalyst for Syracuse's 10-win season and so many things that they accomplished this year, not to take anything away from a number of players, by the way, that are pursuing NFL careers, which we'll talk about here. But listen, when you've got a franchise quarterback in Kyle McCord, and a franchise quarterback, period, especially in the transfer portal era, that can come in and make a difference. And Kyle McCord was one of the best transfer portal success stories, not only in college football this year, but we have seen in the portal era, someone that can have the right fit, that can take a step forward, that prior relationships can pay off. Fran Brown watching Kyle McCord, as he liked to call him, Little League Kyle in Pop Warner football in New Jersey, had the right spot. That led to other players coming in, the talent that you can bring in. Jackson Meeks at wide receiver, for example, who's going to pursue a career in the National Football League, combined with some players that had come back, the new coaching staff. It just could not have worked out any better. So for all the hand-wringing and complaints about the transfer portal, it can offer you an opportunity to enhance your career. I mean, Kyle McCord was basically thrown out of Ohio State because he didn't beat Michigan, and they almost won that game. And he had a great season at Ohio State, short of beating Michigan. And we all know what that means for Ohio State, who's going to play Texas for a spot in the national championship game tonight against Notre Dame. So we'll see who comes out in that one here. But what Kyle McCord brought, look, we'll talk about the numbers and all those things, but what Kyle McCord brought was a belief that Syracuse football could be up there in the upper echelon once again. Fran Brown is certainly the architect of that, right? But in football, coach and quarterback are hand in hand. And Fran Brown has said that a number of times, right? His quarterback he's 1A to the 1. He is second in charge, essentially, right? If you have a quarterback that you can trust fully and hand the keys to. And McCord came in an accomplished quarterback, a highly rated player from New Jersey and all the New Jersey connections that the Syracuse roster has. And from the minute he walked in, commanded the room. You could tell he was different as a quarterback, had that spring practice to establish that much needed chemistry, right? In the portal era, when you've got to accelerate that process of getting on the same page. And it was interesting what Kyle McCord said about Jeff Nixon and how good of a coach he is. And Fran Brown certainly deserves credit here, but I'm going to pull up what McCord said about Nixon. And again, just all these things that fall into place, especially for a quarterback that's been around the block, that knows these things. You can tailor an offense to somebody with his skill set. Here's what he said about Jeff Nixon. Quote, "He's one of the smartest football minds I've ever had a chance to be around. He put me in position to go out and have success. His play calling, I think, was phenomenal, especially in situations where we had to have it. I owe a lot of my success to him." That's Kyle McCord on Jeff Nixon via Pete Thamel, by the way, who broke the story and talked to Kyle McCord. And there's some other quotes that Pete Thamel has in his ESPN story about why he decided to move on and looking back and reflecting on his career here. It was just the perfect storm in a ways. You get the right coach who brings in all kinds of recruits and transfers, but the coaching staff that knew Kyle McCord, that was familiar with him. McCord had known Jeff Nixon from travels out there and just how small that community of football can be. And it all turns out to be one of the greatest single seasons Syracuse football has ever seen at any position, let alone the most important position. 4,779 yards. That's a Syracuse single season record. 34 touchdowns. That's a Syracuse single season record. And oh, by the way, led the country in passing and set the all-time ACC record for a single season passing mark. That is the legacy that Kyle McCord leaves behind. That man will never buy another meal or drink in this town so long as he shall live. To come in 1 year and set those marks and put himself firmly on the Mount Rushmore of Syracuse quarterbacks is incredible. And again, it goes to show you the success stories that can come out of the transfer portal in the modern era that we are in here in college football. Now, we can argue who else is on that Mount Rushmore. I mean, you certainly have to put Donovan McNabb there. It was the number 2 overall pick in the 1998 NFL draft and should be a Hall of Famer and probably will be a Hall of Famer. Don McPherson almost won the Heisman, should have won the Heisman in 87. I think that's spot 3. And then, we can haggle about this later about whether it's Eric Dungy, Ryan Nassib, or Marvin Graves who gets that 4th spot. But Kyle McCord is unequivocally on it. Think about the feelings he brought a year ago, just over a year ago, when he committed and came to Syracuse. That a high-level I remember getting the phone call. The first indication I had, and I reported the story that Kyle McCord was coming to Syracuse and intended to sign with Syracuse a year ago. The first phone call I got about that was from somebody who covered Ohio State that was hearing that this was a possibility. And I was like, it was in that moment when I knew, okay, things are different. You have a coach that has this connection with this type of high-level player, right? But could you get the NIL money together? And the answer was yes, and that's a consideration now. What does Syracuse do with the NIL money that would have gone to Kyle McCord? Do you throw all your eggs into another basket for a quarterback, or do you kind of spread the wealth because there are other positions that are available here? But just the feeling of having a franchise quarterback and a quarterback that could just get you out of so many situations. I'm going to go back to when I knew McCord was different, right? You had seen the Ohio State film, and can he come in? And I was impressed with what he said during spring ball and in training camp, and he just felt like this guy was in command, in charge. So many players on the team, so many coaches on the team that just praised what kind of quarterback and leader that he was, but we had to see it on the field. And I'll never forget it. And I have the clip right here, courtesy of Dane Brugler of The Athletic, who I talked to about this clip. It was the Georgia Tech game, second game of the year. And for those of you watching, you're going to see the throw here. So Kyle McCord just takes a step back, finds the receiver in stride here. And I remember distinctly turning to Mike McAllister, who was sitting next to me in the press box at the JMA Wireless Dome, and saying to Mike, "That's an NFL throw." And I had probably a little more colorful language into that, right? I turned to Mike, I said, "That was a bleeping NFL throw." And we just kept seeing it, and you just knew from whatever your moment was, when you knew that Kyle McCord was him, was the guy, was different, that was my moment right there. And I'm glad I had the video to kind of demonstrate that. And we saw it all year long. He had one bad game, the Pitt game, where he threw a bunch of interceptions, and Pitt just seemingly almost had the Syracuse game plan in their back pocket there. That's it. I mean, yes, Syracuse also lost to Pittsburgh and Boston College this year, but Fran Brown flat out said it, and I don't want to misquote him here, but when he was asked about this and some situations that Syracuse was in, that was not on McCord. If anything, McCord just didn't have an opportunity to get on the field one more time to beat Boston College, right? So, yeah, the Pitt loss was what it was. Stanford was a defensive play at the end of the game. Syracuse's third loss of the season. Syracuse lost to Stanford. They lost to BC. They lost to Pitt, right? BC, back and forth game, close game. Pitt, just total, anomaly as it turned out for the phenomenal season that McCord had in the Stanford game. They ran out of time. They couldn't get him back on the field because that was one last defensive play. Stanford kicks a field goal to win at the end. Incredible season. Incredible player, incredible person. It was a pleasure to talk to him and cover him. And now he goes into the National Football League, and this is generally considered a pretty weak quarterback draft. And that's something that McCord certainly had to think about. Let's say he got the waiver. Let's say that the NCAA gave him a fifth year, which would be a second year here, one more year, as we were all hoping for, just like Carmelo Anthony back in the day in basketball. Let's say he gets that. What McCord's got to think about is your stock higher than what it is right now? I told you the records that he set. Scouts have all the notes on McCord they need from his time at Ohio State and at Syracuse. Terrific pocket presence, can read defenses. You can tailor an offense around him. As a person, no red flags in terms of things off the field. The one thing that's going to hurt Kyle McCord is he's not mobile, right? McCord at the NFL level is going to struggle to get out of the pocket and extend plays with his feet. One of the apt comparisons, and I think probably the best for McCord at the next level, is Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy was the literal last pick in the NFL draft. The difference between Brock Purdy and Kyle McCord is Brock Purdy can move. He's actually faster than McCord and does have some ability to escape with his feet, right? So in an era where everybody wants Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or players that can move and Lamar Jackson, right? Make plays with their feet. That's not what you're going to get with McCord. But what you're going to get is a guy that I think could stick around the National Football League for a while and is somebody that can come in, maybe not start right away, but that's ideal. Third, fourth, fifth round pick, probably a day 3 guy, which is rounds 4 through 7. But look, McCord's going to play in the East-West Shrine game. I would imagine he's going to get an invite to the Combine. Through pro workouts, somebody gets a closer look at him. And again, in a weaker draft, Carson Beck's no longer in this draft. I think a couple other guys that maybe you thought would be in this draft are going to stay in college for another year. He slides up the board. Mel Kiper Jr. has had McCord in his top 10 quarterback rankings. That goes back and forth. We'll see how that evolves through the NFL draft process. So look, end of the day, that guy's getting picked. Kyle McCord is going to be on a National Football League roster next year. But if he comes back, listen, the schedule next year is an absolute bear. And I'm just going to remind you of it. I know you guys know going into next year because of the smart, savvy fans that you are, but just a little reminder of Syracuse's 2025 schedule. These are the games that are either on the road or on a neutral site. They're going to open the season against Tennessee and Atlanta. There's going to be a lot of orange in that building regardless, and I know that Syracuse fans are going to show up, especially with the enthusiasm around this program right now, but Tennessee fans are going to dominate that building. And oh, by the way, Tennessee was a playoff team this year. Notre Dame is in the national championship game, as we saw with what a terrific game that was with Penn State, by the way, with that win over Penn State. Syracuse plays Notre Dame next year. They're at Clemson, playoff team. Or not a playoff team, pardon me, but a high-level ACC team, right? Miami. Syracuse beat Miami. Kyle McCord outdueled Cam Ward, right? Going to Miami now with Carson Beck at quarterback from Georgia, not going to be easy. SMU, playoff team. Won the ACC. Georgia Tech, they're going to have revenge on their mind a little bit, don't you think? After what happened at the Dome, I showed you the throw from McCord in that Georgia Tech game. They're going to remember everything that was said, and there was some, Fran Brown, with the comments, and go back to what he said. I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but he wasn't happy with some things that Brent Key was saying about how tough Northeast teams are, and from 12-4, we're going to be the toughest team on the field, right? Like, Fran Brown played that beautifully in motivating his team, but Georgia Tech's going to remember that. So Syracuse actually goes to Atlanta twice next season. That's the road. Home games. UConn, bowl team this year. What, did they win 8 or 9 games this year? Jim Morris doing a nice job with that program. Colgate, game you got to handle, of course. They have a new head coach coming in, by the way. Cortland's head coach, who won a national championship at Cortland at the Division III level. He's going to be the new head coach at Colgate. Duke was 9-3 last year. Bill Belichick. I've kind of got the Carolina Blue on as we speak. Bill Belichick at North Carolina. Who knows what kind of team he's going to have by the time they come to the Dome. They're coming in. BC beat Pitt. BC and Pittsburgh rounded out. BC and Pitt beat Syracuse last year. That's not an easy schedule, especially, man, that road neutral slate there, all the playoff teams, ACC champions, and you want a quarterback for that schedule. And I think that's one of the main reasons people were hoping Kyle McCord would come back. If you're going to face that kind of schedule, you do not want to do it with an inexperienced quarterback. So short of Syracuse finding another portal quarterback, remember, the portal may be closed in a sense of putting your name into it, but you can sign with anybody at any time. And ideally, you want to get them in soon with spring practice starting. The new semester starts next week. Like, this is an accelerated process here, as we know. McCord was in and ready and in the offseason program, and from the minute spring ball started last year and last semester started, he was locked and loaded. So as it stands now, who's going to take over for Kyle McCord? You go from having an established Mount Rushmore all-time quarterback in Syracuse history in one season to a quarterback competition. And the tenor of the conversation about what kind of team you can be changes just like that. Again, short of another splash in the portal or something that we don't know about as we speak here. So you have Rickie Collins Jr., who Fran Brown brought in from LSU in the transfer portal, didn't play much at LSU. Look, what you see on film is impressive. He was a high-level recruit. You go to LSU, you're certainly one of the, best of the best in the high school crop. Was looking for another opportunity with Grant Nussmeier there, and just, same thing. Some guys just can't crack the lineup. You go to these high-level programs, there's 2 or 3 players that could start elsewhere. That is why the portal exists, so you can find a place where you can go play. Rickie Collins has 3 years of eligibility left. From everything I've seen on film, I'm pretty impressed with him. What I don't have is what McCord had, game film. Stats, numbers. You knew, at least could get a sense of what kind of quarterback you have coming in. We don't really have that with Rickie Collins Jr. Jakhari Williams. Everything I saw from Jakhari Williams at camp, I liked. A lot of the shine was on McCord, so he was kind of off in the shadows here. But I haven't seen enough of Jakhari Williams in a game setting to sit here and tell you unequivocally he's the guy. And neither does Syracuse, by the way. That's why they brought in Rickie Collins Jr. That's why they wanted McCord back. Like, if Jakhari was like and he's only a freshman going to be a sophomore. It's nothing against him, right? He just doesn't have the licks and the experience. And by the way, remember, Jakhari Williams was recruited by Dino Babers, was a holdover that they kept and were impressed with enough to keep on this roster. So he's got to continue to evolve. You got a couple of freshmen. I like Luke Carney a lot. Luke Carney, who is going to be on campus for the start of the semester next week and will be in spring practice. Over 10,000 yards, 4 state championships at Texas high school football. Now, it's a private league. Some people say, you got to take that into consideration. But there's also a lot of people I've talked to that say if Luke Carney was at, the so-called higher levels of Texas high school football, he would have done just fine. By the way, he is a dual threat. I'd have to look up the numbers. I don't have them right here in front of me, but Luke Carney's numbers are huge. Not only over 10,000 yards passing, he can run the football. He can throw on the run, but listen, you're talking about a freshman here. To expect a freshman to come in and win that job And to put a freshman out there against that schedule, you're asking a lot there. And then you have Rich Belin, who was Gatorade Player of the Year in New York State, one of the better high school prospects in New York State. Fran Brown and that staff out there now. They're recruiting as we speak. Recruiting season is open, and they want to lock down as many players as they can for the future out of New York State. Don't let them leave New York State, right? That's your quarterback room, short of another entry to the roster from the portal, which now you have to wonder, what was your plan B, right? Because they knew that the possibility of McCord coming back, guys, as much as the NCAA, and Chris Carlson wrote an excellent story about this, which I would highly encourage you to watch, or pardon me, to read on syracuse.com. McCord getting a fifth year of eligibility was not a Hail Mary, because there's so many precedents that are falling that the NCAA has put out there, some prior rules and regulations, and people just keep challenging the NCAA, and they just keep caving on a lot of these things. There is a lot of talk that they're going to grant athletes a fifth year of eligibility as it was. There was the recent case with the quarterback who at Vanderbilt, who, now this was a different case because his case revolved around his time at junior college, right? And essentially saying that shouldn't have counted and that he maintains that eligibility. And he won that case. There's actually a couple of players on the Syracuse roster. Jacob Bradford and Mark Petrie fit that description. Can they get extra years of eligibility? And from what I understand, I don't think so, but we'll continue to track that and see if that's the case. But all these precedents, all these rules, these longtime NCAA, almost ironclad policies are all coming down, right? NIL the past few years, the way the portal works. It used to be that if you wanted to transfer, you'd have to sit out a year. That's no longer the case, right? So I think people had a lot of, for lack of a better term, faith. They had a lot of inclination that McCord would get that fifth year, but it was still unprecedented. There was really, this was, when you hear about case, they always cite certain cases and certain things in law, like, oh yeah, in 1897, this happened. There's no precedent for this. What McCord was trying to get, because usually you have to show a hardship, right? Did a coach play you injured? Were you put out there against your will? You can go through the situations that you would have to prove, essentially, to why the NCAA should grant you a hardship and give you another year. Kyle McCord, when he was a freshman at Ohio State, and I think this was kind of what they were leaning on. When he was a freshman at Ohio State, he played 5 games. And he was, because the limit is 4, right? If you want a red shirt, you can't play more than 4 games. He played in 5, and he barely got over that line. He was put into a game when Ohio State was up, I think it was 56-7, so just crazy. Mop-up duty time. The other quarterback on that roster, whose name escapes me at the moment, had been arrested. So here's McCord as a freshman put out there in mop-up duty, which put him in that 5th game and left him without the possibility of that extra year. Now, there were COVID years. That's another thing you had to throw into the discussion. And a lot of things that just seemed like the NCAA just rubber stamping this stuff, right? Yeah, sure. You want another? Here you go, right? So I think that gave a lot of people some hope that McCord was going to get it. Now, as we speak, we don't know if the NCAA denied the waiver or not. There was some reporting out there I saw today that Syracuse had not heard that McCord has made this decision independent of whether he was going to get the waiver or not. We'll see if that flushes out, right? We'll see if McCord just couldn't wait any longer for the waiver, weighed his options, and this is what he was going to do anyway. Even if he got the waiver, he would go to the NFL. Like, we'll see how that all flushes out and whether or not the waiver got denied or whatever the case on that is, right? If McCord did get the waiver, it would have been unprecedented for a player to be granted a 5th year, essentially because he wanted to come back. Because there wasn't, from what we could find, a viable hardship, or what we know about, for him to be granted that 5th year. Ultimately, he's going to move on anyway. That decision's been made. He's taken a step forward. But I think that'll be interesting to flush out and see, well, what was the waiver denied? Or as we speak, we don't know this. He just, from what we understand, as we speak today, he just made the decision independent of that. Syracuse didn't get the waiver back, at least as we speak here at 3:40 p.m. on Friday, January 10th, and McCord made that decision. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And again, how that goes in the future. Because Syracuse fans are going to kind of grind their teeth a little bit if those fifth years get universally put out there this year. Be like, man, the timing on that could not be any worse, because if that fifth-year rule was in place, you play the what-if game. Is Kyle McCord out there for a fifth year for Syracuse? So it's fascinating to look at. It's going to dominate the headlines now and the stories about what Syracuse does going forward, pursuing a quarterback in the portal, or if they have an open competition at camp. But as we speak now, I left out Michael Johnson Jr. out of that list, by the way, who we should include. Remember, Michael Johnson Jr., who was Kyle McCord's backup, got granted another year of eligibility. He is coming back. We thought he was done, but he is going to return for another year. So is MJ Jr. We didn't see any of MJ Jr. out there, who's the son of Syracuse offensive coach Michael Johnson. So you got Michael Johnson Jr., you got the transfer he brought in and paid to bring in Rickie Collins Jr. from LSU, Jakhari Williams, Luke Carney, and Rich Belin. Let the games begin. Who of that group, and that's the group we know of now, can go into spring ball and now you're the guy after the guy. Think about this. Whoever wins the job, whoever is the quarterback, you're the guy after the guy. Kyle McCord came in, and it was the perfect storm of what a transfer quarterback can do in one season. Record-setting quarterback. I'll tell you what else Kyle McCord did, though, whether that be freshmen, recruits, or transfers. He showed you can do it at Syracuse. You can be a high-level 4, 5-star quarterback, whatever parameters you want to put on this, and you can succeed at Syracuse. They will bring in the talent. You will get the NIL money, and that's not the NIL money that, Georgia, and I'd say Georgia, Carson Beck even left to go to Miami. But some of these high-price NIL payments we're hearing out there for quarterbacks, Syracuse is not in that territory, but you can make some money here. You want to be a starting quarterback at Syracuse? Kyle McCord, look at this example that Fran Brown now has. We brought in McCord, and look what we did for him. That puts Syracuse in a conversation and on a map they have not been in for a long time. There's been some good quarterbacks that have come through here, but the list of high-level NFL draft-worthy quarterbacks, let's face it, has not been very long. That's why McCord's on Mount Rushmore here. There was an opportunity to come in and be that type of quarterback. It's not a long list. This is not quarterback you at Syracuse. We went through the names that have done. There's been a lot of guys that have held down the fort and have been good, and you respect the job that they do. I mean, Garrett Schrader in recent years, transfer that came in, and I think you got to respect the job that Garrett Schrader did, even through injuries. And, we've talked about that and what he built up to. He's, I think, 6th all-time single-season passing mark, and by the time he walked out of here, it was pretty darn impressive, right? It can happen. But the list of quarterbacks in Syracuse history, let's face it, you can rattle them off your tongue of the guys that have gone on to become NFL-level guys and do it very quickly. Kyle McCord, in the modern era, okay, McNabb, McPherson, Nassib, even Eric Dungy, all played in a different era, in a different time. College football has changed dramatically. It is semi-pro football now. McCord showed to those quarterbacks out there, you can do it at Syracuse. That's huge. So I keep saying the guy after the guy, it's going to be tough for this group, but I'm not saying this group can't produce a high-level quarterback that can go out there and keep this going here. But McCord set a pretty darn high standard. A record-setting 4,779 yards, all-time ACC passing leader in a single season, Syracuse passing leader in a single season, 34 touchdowns, Syracuse single-season record. What a bar he set. But, again, the good news there is that when Fran Brown has these conversations with these quarterbacks going forward, he can say, we brought in Kyle, and he did that. You can succeed here. You can win 10 games here, like McCord did. Fran Brown has talked about what the standard is, sitting there at a press conference, hyping up the Holiday Bowl, saying we wish we were playing next week, and we should be playing next week. And frankly, in the portal era, what you can do in a year, they lost to Stanford on the last play of the game. They lost to BC by a touchdown. Okay, wipe the Pitt game off the board. It's, that was their total WTF day, right? You beat Stanford, you beat BC, you're in the college football playoff. That's how close they were. That's what you can do in the portal NIL era and with a quarterback on the level of Kyle McCord, right? The fact that Syracuse can throw that card on the table and say, it's not a what if, it's not a possibility, it's not something you have to dream. Someone did it here. Now, they didn't get to the playoff, right? But they can show McCord as an example of you don't have to go to Georgia. You don't have to go to Miami. You don't have to go to Clemson. You can do it at Syracuse. That's huge, right? That's huge. So the legacy he's going to leave is not only somebody that won 10 games and set all these records. The legacy now that I'll be fascinated to follow is, who did he set up? I mean, the residuals, Syracuse basketball obviously is having a rough go of it. Okay? They're not making the tournament for the fourth straight year in all likelihood, right? They might not even make the ACC tournament. And Syracuse basketball needs to get back to what it was. There's a lot of heat growing around Adrian Autry. And the reason I'm saying this is Carmelo Anthony, 21 years, 22? Yeah, it's 2025. Woo! 22 years ago, right? But the legacy of Melo, even players today, they know who Carmelo Anthony is. They know where he went to school, right? That has put Syracuse on a radar and renewed their standing with a new generation of players. The facility that's named after him, right? His son, of course, coming in next year, which will rekindle those conversations, right? That's what somebody that was here for 1 year can do. He can set a legacy. Carmelo Anthony set a legacy that continues to this day and gives Syracuse, again, they don't always take advantage of it because they're really struggling right now, but it gets you in that kind of conversation. Kyle McCord can have that kind of impact going forward, especially in the NIL portal era, that you can tap a high-level portal quarterback on the shoulder who, let's face it, guys, a year ago, 2 years ago, would never answer Syracuse's phone call, would never talk to Syracuse, would never consider Syracuse. But through a myriad of reasons, including they knew each other when he was Little League Kyle, you got Kyle McCord to come to Syracuse and become one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of this school in a year. That's what you hope going forward. In terms of this group and the competition they're going to have for quarterback, I mean, we'll continue to talk about that. We'll track it. It becomes a different but interesting conversation. Quarterback competitions are always one of the more fascinating things to follow. And remember, it's not just quarterback. You have LaQuint Allen, who moves on to the National Football League. I wrote a story about this yesterday. Hope you guys can check that out on syracuse.com or listen to, I believe it's called First Draft. There's a podcast that Mel Kiper Jr. does. Had high praise for LaQuint Allen and his NFL chances. Have you seen Willis, Will Nixon coming back, Jaden Hart, Malachi James at running back, but someone's got to take the top spot at that position, right? Jackson Meeks moves on from the wide receiver position. Trevor Pena is coming back. Justice Ross Simmons, does he take a step up? Darrell Gill Jr., huge Holiday Bowl, huge plays and had a few big games for Syracuse, showed he can step in there. Very talented freshman in Emmanuel Ross. Is Zeed Haynes going to be around next year? He didn't go in the portal, and I've heard no indications he will not be. So a talented group of receivers, but that now they're working with an unestablished quarterback, at least at this point, barring Syracuse bringing in somebody in the portal, right? You got to replace 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line. And again, I think people brought up a good point. I want to go to a little bit of what our Syracuse sports insiders had to say a little bit here. But do you take some of that NIL money that let's be honest here. You bring Kyle McCord back. What are you paying Kyle McCord? What's the market for a guy like that to come back to Syracuse? We're talking $2.5, $3 million probably, all told, right? Now you can take some of that money and do you spread the wealth? You got to replace a bunch of guys in the secondary. Elijah Clark moves on to the NFL. Marcellus Barnes, Jaden Bellamy, Jaden Gold went into the portal, right? Clarence Lewis going to the NFL draft. He's out of eligibility. Do you take some of that and try and find some players at that position, right? Syracuse has only brought in 7 guys in the portal. They've only lost 10. That's been an ongoing conversation here. And now you kind of wonder how much of a linchpin was this McCord decision, because it felt like so much of it hinged on what McCord was going to do, not only at quarterback, but at other positions on this roster. So how does that apply now to players you pursue in other positions that maybe you can pay a little bit more, that if you had committed to Kyle McCord, maybe you couldn't, in that sense? The reverb from this, the ripples in the pond from McCord's decision, we'll now see. But you get to January 10th, how much longer could they wait? As we found out today, this was it. And he had to make his decision. And now Fran Brown, who, let's face it, has been given a lot of leverage here. You win 10 games and come in and did everything Syracuse did in 2024. You have got a fan base that believes in what you do, saw what you did in the portal, not only with McCord. They have the biggest recruiting class in the country coming in, and who of those freshmen can come in and fill some spots and help Syracuse in that department? Are they counting on some of these guys to come in and compete right away for that? The roster limit goes up to 105 next year, we think. I mean, it's kind of a dot the I's, cross the T's kind of thing, and they're anticipating that. So it's fascinating. All with Tennessee looming to start the year and the schedule that we brought up. So that's the timing of this, right? You would almost, in an ideal world, bring in McCord and have everything happen for Syracuse football in 2025 rather than 2024, given the schedule they're playing. But a lot of people look at this and say, hey, in Fran we trust. They'll figure it out. He has given the fan base that kind of faith and that kind of hope because of what they did last year. Mind you, not as tough of a schedule, but you can't doubt that Syracuse can compete and run with these kind of programs and at least be in that conversation, because at least through 1 year, they've proven they can. Having a franchise quarterback, though, is a huge reason for that, right? It solves so many of your problems, right? So that is going to be the lingering question that will echo through the offseason. Who wins the quarterback job? Who is the quarterback? That was always the thing, right? That was always the little asterisk attached to McCord. It was temporary. And for a few weeks, everybody played, trying to think of the best way to think this, the gamble that they did, right? Was the ball going to fall on red or black? They took that gamble knowing they probably didn't have a big chance to win, but it was kind of Lloyd Christmas, right? You're telling me there's a chance. If there's a chance we can get McCord back, then we're gonna go for that. It didn't work out. He's moving on. So the central question, no matter what they do from here until August 30th, who's the quarterback? In the shadow of somebody who came in and put together one of the greatest seasons in the history of Syracuse football. It's going to be fascinating to follow, guys. And, of course, we'll be all over it here on Syracuse Sports, on syracuse.com. And I know our Syracuse Sports Insiders are going to be all over this, too. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider means that you can text me directly. What a conversation we've been having. You guys have been asking a lot about McCord. You hear anything about McCord? You hear anything about McCord? And when we have breaking news, information, analysis, our Syracuse Sports Insiders get it first. We would love for you to sign up today and be a part of this growing community of some of the most passionate Syracuse sports fans out there. And there's a couple easy ways to do it. You can hit joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports, or you see it there at the bottom of your screen. Text the word orange to 315-847-3895. Cool thing is you can try it free, absolutely free for 2 weeks. It's just $3.99 a month after that. Less than $1 a week to have direct text message access to me. If we have breaking news, our Syracuse Sports Insiders get it first. the conversations we have during games, the back and forth, things you want us to ask Syracuse players and coaches, the back and forth and the conversation we have is amazing. So we would love for you to sign up and become a Syracuse Sports Insider today. And here's a little bit of what you guys had to say when the McCord news came down this afternoon. Matty P said, so now that the drama is over, do you think we can expect a splashy portal get or two still? Or is next season shaping up to be a go with what we've got season? I got to tell you, Matty, I'm leaning on the second part of that. I'm leaning on you go with what you got, who's in the quarterback room, the recruits they're bringing in. Fran did hint at the end of the season that they weren't going to be as aggressive in the portal as people would think. Maybe they didn't lose as many people in the portal as they thought they were going to, right? Again, they only lost 10 guys and brought in 7. Biggest recruiting class in the country here. That's why you got Rickie Collins Jr. That's the guy they felt ideally could have spent a year working with McCord and then take over, but now he's in the spotlight to come in and take the job. And can he take the job? That is the way I'm leaning, Matty, but college football today, you don't leave out the big splash. You don't count out Fran Brown to go out into that portal. I don't want to say and find the next McCord because that would be a very lofty comparison, but somebody that fits that description, right? Somebody that's got 3-4 years of experience that they like, that they could tailor the offense around. It's going to be fascinating to watch. From my guy Mark in San Diego, we need to take some of this money that was earmarked for Kyle and give it to the defense. Syracuse needs starters at defensive end, linebacker, safety, and cornerback. Yeah, you have Justin Barron leaving that defense. You have Marlo Wax leaving that defense. I mentioned Clark. I mentioned all the guys in the secondary. Fidel Diggs, remember, out of eligibility. There's another impact player out of the portal. Defense needs a lot of guys who either step up or maybe they have to pluck out of the portal still. From Jim B, not that Jim B, who says, the fan in me wanted McCord back, but the truth is if I was advising him, he's got to go this year. I'm not sure his stock gets any higher next year with the schedule and some uncertainty with the offensive line and playmakers. It's disappointing, but I think we all got our hopes up for something that was probably unlikely anyway. Would have loved for him to come back, but in the end, this is exactly where we were the day after the Miami game. From Robbie M, says, makes sense for Kyle. Weak quarterback draft. If he goes to the right team, no reason why he can't be comparable to a Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, or a Brock Purdy type quarterback. From Brian S., who says, good for Kyle. In truth, it's exactly what he should do. He won't be able to increase his stock higher than it is now, but notes with an extremely harder schedule next year, 4 playoff opponents, 11 of 12 bowl teams. Syracuse will be hard-pressed to get 8 wins even with Kyle McCord next year. A few more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders here, including Gene, who says, good luck to Kyle. This one hurts the same way it did when Carmelo left. I was making that comparison earlier. There was hope for a couple of weeks and then a giant letdown. And Chicago Mike says this, Syracuse had a great year with McCord at quarterback. Wish him well. Good luck in the National Football League. Class act all around. Tell him to stay away from the Bears. They're a mess. From Randy H., who says, I'm a bit concerned about the quarterback room next year, though I trust Fran. It's a tough schedule to have to learn how to be a quarterback again. So, yeah, if it is Rickie Collins Jr. or Jakhari Williams, no matter what, no matter how good of a coaching staff is, how you tailor the offense to them, the connections they make in spring ball camp and then summer, then fall camp, you start the season against Tennessee. You have 11 of your 12 teams, as noted there from our insiders, that made a bowl game. 4 playoff teams. That is unequivocally one of the hardest schedules in the country, which you would like to have a Kyle McCord for, but you don't. So you've got to find your way around that. That's college football, man. The dynamic and how it changes year to year now, it's fascinating. And now Syracuse has the big question: who plays quarterback in 2025? We're not going to answer that today, but we will continue to follow it as we go. Thank you for hanging with us here on this live edition of Syracuse Sports. Much more to come. Check out our coverage on syracuse.com. Chris Carlson's been doing an amazing job following the story, all the reaction that's going to come from this, and the ripples in the pond that come from this. But while reality's setting in here, you just have to say thank you, Kyle McCord, for providing those memories and coming in and having one of the greatest seasons Syracuse football's ever seen at any position. And the fact that he did that and the impact it could have for years to come is going to be something fascinating to watch. Thanks to our Syracuse Sports Insiders for their great insight, questions, opinion, analysis. As always, again, we'd love for you to sign up today to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. That's the easiest way to do it. Or just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. Try it free for 2 weeks, just $3.99 a month after that. Would love to hear from you on our Syracuse Sports Insider text line. By the way, they get exclusive commentary heard on this podcast. We don't go to social media. We don't go anywhere else. Only Syracuse Sports Insiders get their voice heard, not only on the podcast, but remember our Syracuse basketball postgame shows continuing here now that they're a heart of ACC play. Syracuse and Boston College. Saturday, it's a 3 o'clock tip. I'll be with you for Syracuse basketball postgame after that. And we hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, not only during the game, but on our postgame shows as well. And sometimes our insiders literally pop on the podcast. And we're going to be doing more of that in 2025. So being a member has its benefits, my friends. So we would love for you to hop on board and become a Syracuse Sports Insider today. That's going to do it for this edition of Syracuse Sports, though, live here reacting to the news that Kyle McCord will declare for the NFL draft and will not return to Syracuse in 2025. You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next time here on Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe, and we'll check you next time here, guys.